Christ is risen. Some coincidences are just too convenient to be accidents. Friday evening, I watched a television show on Animal Planet. Now, normally a lot of the shows on Animal Planet are about how nice the animals are. This one was about how some animals will kill you and eat you. And there were 4 people who had been attacked by animals and lived to tell about it. And their stories were amazing. And then yesterday evening, just before a vigil, I was talking to Subdeacon Andre here, Skurikin, and he told me about this little pamphlet here, which I'm going to read a little bit of a little later. It's all about suffering and the significance of suffering for us as Christians. And then shortly thereafter, during the vigil, Father David mentioned to me, asked me if I could help out by preaching the homily today. And it being the Sunday of the Paralytic, I thought, aha, too many things lining up here. Obviously, this was meant to be. So here's what I was thinking. The healing of the paralytic is very different from most of the other healings we read about in the Gospels. Most of them are people coming to Christ, knowing that he heals people, or at least having heard that he heals people, and asking him to heal them. And he does. He heals many of them, not all of them. In fact, he heals so many, he gets so tired that he has to break away and go and take a rest for a while. And some of those people, he says to them, your faith has made you whole. And so we know they're men of faith, and we see their faith demonstrated. Their belief in him, their willingness to be healed, the humility and the way they approach him. With the paralytic, we don't see any of that, really. Christ simply finds him by the pool, and Christ speaks and asks him, do you want to be healed? And then the man simply tells Christ his story. He's been there 38 years waiting to be healed, but he can't be healed because he's paralyzed, and he can't get up quick enough to get into the pool to be healed when the waters are disturbed. 38 years he's done this. He doesn't actually ask Christ to heal him. He doesn't even know who Christ is. Even after he's healed, he doesn't know who Christ is. The Jews ask him, who was the man who healed me? And he says, I don't know. He's disappeared. But what we do know about the paralytic was he wanted to be healed. He knew he needed to be healed. And that in itself is a blessing, because a lot of people who don't know they need to be healed. So they don't come for healing to anyone. They don't come for healing for physical ailments, and sometimes it kills them. They die earlier than they would have because they didn't know they needed healing. Or very often, more often in fact, people need spiritual healing, and yet they don't come to the physicians who can give them that healing because they don't know they need it. So knowing you need it is in itself a blessing. But to know that you need healing, you have to also have suffered something, endured some ailment or injury to teach you that you know you need healing. And that brings me to Animal Planet and the 4 people testified. Amazing stories. There was a man who had his arm bit off by a shark off the coast of Alabama. There was a woman who had her arm bit off by an alligator in a river in Florida. There was a woman who was attacked by a polar bear in Canada, who had her scalp ripped halfway off her head. And there was a man bitten by a rattlesnake in Smoky Mountains. All of them survived. All of them not only survived, but thrived, as we would say. They learned something from it. Every one of them said they were grateful not just for having survived their attack, but having suffered it. The whole episode meant so much to them. It taught them things they never knew before. One thing it taught them amazingly, the ones attacked by the shark and the polar bear and the alligator, it taught them that when that happens, you sometimes don't feel any pain. All 3 of them said, I didn't feel a thing until I was in the hospital, until somebody came to rescue me and started treating me, and then the pain set in. But during the attack, while they're having their arms bitten off, they didn't feel anything. Why? Because, well, pain is actually a gift from God. Pain is a signal, an alarm that tells you you need to do something different or you will suffer injury. Take your hand away from the flame. It might burn you. When you're being attacked by a polar bear, you don't need that signal. You know something's wrong. You know you have to respond. And so the brain just sort of shuts off those messages. It ignores them entirely. The brain has other things to do when you're under attack like that to survive. And so you don't actually notice that pain and don't have any recollection of it later on. These three people attested. This to me is greatly comforting, because we do oftentimes hear of terrible stories of people who suffer excruciating injuries and death. And you think, oh, gee, how painful that must have been. Well, in many cases, no, it's not that painful. The injury's terrible, but they don't, by the grace of God, we don't actually experience that pain. And many of the stories of the martyrs, the ones who are being burned at the stake or being torn apart by their torturers, a lot of times they're said not to experience that pain. And that's not just a pious myth, because here we have these three people who've been attacked by an alligator, a shark, and a polar bear, and they're telling us they didn't experience any pain. The martyrs, of course, had faith in Christ, and that made all the world of difference to them. But God actually showers that grace of healing upon all of us, giving us all the opportunity to be saved if we would listen to what happens to us. The second thing these people all learned is that it really did change their lives. They were better people afterwards. It made a difference to them. They all went on to do something better, to be an example to others. In fact, one of the women said, somebody came to her, she called it a person of faith, came to her, and in the emergency room, and she said, he said to me, I don't know why you suffered this, but you do. And she was struck. She was like, oh. Suddenly it made sense that, well, there's a reason for this. Everything happens for a reason. And she was a teacher. And she thought, I'm a teacher. Obviously, if I'm to teach people how to deal with a suffering like this, I have to suffer it myself. All of these people also learned how important it is to turn to others, our reliance upon others. They all saved, they all lived because of the help of others. The man who was bit by the shark made it out of the water, but then collapsed on the beach. But people were there to take care of him, to bind up his tourniquet, put a tourniquet on him, take him to the hospital. The woman attacked by the alligator had a man in the water who was able to beat the alligator on the head with a paddle. The woman attacked by the polar bear screamed. This is in a little town, actually, well north, in some little island. Screamed. A man heard her scream, came out of his house, and distracted the bear, giving her just enough time to run into his house for safety. And then the polar bear attacked the man. Then another man appeared with a gun and shot the polar bear. And they all lived except the polar bear. And the man attacked by the snake, well, that's an amazing story. He's out foraging for something, some honey or something like that. I can't remember. He's bitten by the snake and immediately starts to go paralyzed, like the paralytic. He doesn't have the use of his arms or his legs. And his tongue swells, and it swells so much that it starts to cut off his air passage. And to breathe, he knows he's getting lightheaded, he knows he's in danger of actually suffocating because of his swollen tongue, so he sticks his fingers as far as he can down his throat to push his tongue down so he can breathe for a while. And when he's not doing that, he's crawling towards his truck because he's thinking, I've got a phone in my truck, and if I can get to my truck, I can call for help. So he crawls as best he can over his truck, and then he climbs as best as he can up the side of the truck, grabbing onto the truck handle. He manages to get out of his key, and he sticks the key in the lock, and then he realizes he's picked the wrong key. And he's jammed it into the lock, and he can't get it out. So he falls back down there by the truck, thinking, I'm going to die here. He starts to pray. Starts to pray for his family, his wife, his children. And then suddenly he hears a voice. And it says, if you don't crawl to that road, you're going to die right here. And that's enough to get him motivated to crawl to that road. And he does so, 100 yards to this road, and he lies down right in the road. Now this is a country road. It's even less than that. It's just a path through the woods, really. People don't travel down that road often. And he knows this. He could be there for days or weeks. He could easily die in hours or minutes. So he starts to pray again, and he again prays for his family, and he asks God to care for them while he's gone. And he goes through their names. As soon as he prays for the last one, pickup truck shows up. Young couple, who put him in the back, take him to the hospital, and he lives to tell it. And he, like the others, made use of the story, becoming an example for others as well. The woman who was attacked by the polar bear decided that, she had been a seasonal worker. She was only there for the summers. But after the attack by the polar bear, she decided she's going to live there forever. She'd made such friends that she thought this is where she ought to be. The teacher went back to teaching, using her infirmity, the loss of her arm, to be a better teacher. A fellow in Alabama, he was a coach. He knew a lot about coaching, but now he had something else to coach people on, overcoming this adversity. That brings me to this little booklet here, and I'm just going to read you a couple of pages, a very brief booklet. And it's called, This Was From Me. It's not kind of Christ on the cover, and the me there is Christ. It's written in the voice of Christ, and it's about suffering. And it begins, have you ever taken into consideration that everything concerning you concerns me too? For what concerns you concerns the apple of my eye. You are dear in my eyes, and I have loved you. For this reason, it is a special joy for me to train you. When temptations rise up against you and the enemy comes upon you like a river, I want you to know this was from me. Your weakness has need of my strength, and your safety lies in giving me the possibility of protecting you. And it was written by Saint Seraphim of Vyritsa in Russia, who died in 1949, suffered under the Soviet rule. And it goes on after that with all the examples of all the various afflictions you might suffer, and the constant refrain, this was from me. God gives us these opportunities to suffer, to learn our need for healing. And only by knowing that need and therefore seeking that need, ultimately, of course, from Him, can we then ourselves be saved. And that salvation is guaranteed. What's the lesson of Pascha other than God is a loving God? There is a God, first of all, and He loves us so much that He will suffer and die for us. And He will rise again from the dead, and He promises that He'll do the same for us if we would only seek Him. If we would only learn the lesson from our own sufferings that we need Him and call out to Him for salvation. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Christos voskres. Christos anviat. Christe agsgat.
The blessings of the Lord be upon you through His grace and love towards mankind, always now and forever.